Slots and Daggers. It has this loop that looks simple until it completely takes over your brain. I'm Vadd here. We're talking about Slots and Daggers. It's a roguelike that replaces more traditional combat with a slot machine. Instead of just pressing buttons, you're spinning wheels. Instead of combos, you're chasing symbols. And instead of skill execution, it's all about decisions. But here's the real question on my mind. Is this just a gimmick? Or is there actually a deep game underneath all the randomness? I think at its core, Slots and Daggers is a roguelike. You're going to go on runs, you'll fight enemies, you'll get upgrades, you will die, and you will start again. Nothing revolutionary here, nothing new, you've done this before. The twist with Slots and Daggers is how you actually play and engage with the world. Instead of attacking directly, you spin a set of reels, just like a, slot machine. Each symbol is going to represent something. It'll be damage, maybe defense, maybe some healing, maybe some currency, maybe a status effect, and every spin then becomes your turn. At its core, the basic play loop then becomes spin, evaluate, lock it in, reroll, execute, power-ups, and that's kind of the entire game. It sounds simple, maybe it sounds complicated, but it looks simple, and frankly, it is simple, but it's also not. For me, I found that the first hour with Slots and Daggers was kind of dangerous. It tricked me. I spin it a few times, I win a few fights, and I think I understand the game. And I'm satisfied. All right, this is simple, this is kind of fun, I get it. And then the game starts to introduce new systems. Slots and Daggers has some synergies, has some scaling enemies. There's a little bit of a reroll economy. There's some resource management. Suddenly, I'm not just slapping the spin button, I'm making decisions on every single turn. I bought a power-up, do I spend my currency to use it? Am I going to try and lock in that damage symbol, or am I going to get hit so hard I need the defense? Should I be trying to set up rerolls for healing, or do I gamble for a bigger combo? I got a power-up that slows down the speed of the wheel. Can I take advantage of that? And over time, as I settle into another run, and then one more run, and then just one more run, Slots and Daggers clicks for me. Let's break down what you're actually doing. Your turn just starts with a spin. That's it. You're given a random set of symbols, and from there, you try and lock in the symbols you want, and you have an opportunity to reroll with some of the power-ups, and you try and build your best possible outcome. And I think there's some kind of subtle tension that's built through all this, because every roll is a risk. You might improve your outcome, or you might lose something valuable. I think that's where the game gets some of its identity. This is not a passive slot machine. I'd actually consider it more controlled randomness and controlled madness even. I think if I had to try and decide what's the best way to describe Slots and Daggers, I would say this. You can quote me on this. I think Slots and Daggers is a thinking game disguised as a gambling game, as every spin is going to force a decision, and those decisions start to stack up. In the early game, you're just trying to survive, but as you get to the mid game, you need to have built some combos and synergies. In late game, you're optimizing every single pull. You start asking questions like, is this symbol worth keeping long term? I can sell some out, I can add some in. Does this fit the build for my run? Am I scaling fast enough? And suddenly, the longer I play Slots and Daggers, I'm not just reacting, I'm actually planning out things. I think something that really surprised me in Slots and Daggers was something that actually kind of really shines through is the build variety. I really was kind of shocked that just these very simple little symbols, how differently they all interact with things. Sometimes we're rewarding stacking, sometimes we're rewarding timing, and sometimes we're rewarding greed and randomness. You can build builds with a high damage kind of burst setup. You can build more of a defensive sustain build. I've done some economy focused gold runs where I bought all kinds of fun items. Sometimes I'm trying to do some kind of combo heavy synergy build. There's actually just multiple ways you can try and get from start to finish. And every single path changes how you approach the exact same fights. And I think that's important because Slots and Daggers doesn't change much visually, which means these builds have to carry the variety. And I think for the most part, they do. I think one of my biggest questions with Slots and Daggers coming into it was simply, how much control will I have? Because it's obviously a slot machine, but it's not pure luck. Yes, there are some broken builds you can build out. I think it's good those exist in the game. You don't generally have access to them at the start, but you will always have your locking mechanics, some reroll options, and upgrade paths. And yes, that randomness really does exist, but on a long enough timeline, your decisions will continue to shape the outcome. Bad runs will happen, but most losses feel like I made the wrong choice, more so than the game has cheated me here. And I think that makes a huge difference. One other big surprise for me was how fast Slots and Daggers ramps up the difficulty. Those first early enemies are very forgiving. And as you progress, as I progress, as we all make our way through Slots and Daggers, all of a sudden the health pools get real thick. All of a sudden the damage hits harder. and your mistakes start to get punished in a major way. And this forced me to respect the system. This made me not just rely on luck, it made me need to have a plan, and so will you. You will need to adapt when your Slots and Daggers plan falls apart. You have this perfect run, you had unlimited shields, and you come into an enemy that does magic damage and avoids all your physical shields. Things are going to happen that you are just not going to expect. And I think that surprise nature of things is where the replayability for Slots of Daggers really earns its keep, because every run is different. Yes, visually about the same, but every run is different, not because of the RNG, but because of how you choose your build, because your build will evolve. You're going to start your run thinking maybe I'll go damage, and all of a sudden the game gives you a poison ability. You're like, could I build around poison? Should I get rid of my high damage for poison because the poison's really adding up? All of a sudden the game gives you this healing synergy, and you pivot your run a little bit, and that pivot then becomes the new run, and these constant adjustments can keep things fresh. You know, for me, the pacing in Slots and Daggers is fast, because each fight is so quick, and each decision you make has almost immediate results. There's very little downtime. And I think that works in the favor here of Slots and Daggers, because the core loop is a little repetitive, but I think that fast pacing of make a decision and immediately see what happens hides some of that repetition. For me, I found the visuals and presentation was definitely the weakest area here. The game's clean. There's nothing cluttered or making things make no sense. There's nothing here that makes you go, what am I looking at? But for me, it's just not visually exciting. You're just looking at symbols, numbers, in a mostly static board. There's not really any spectacle, and I think it would be a mistake to assume there will be. And, you know, this matters because the gameplay is engaging to play. It's less engaging to watch. And I don't have a whole lot to say on the audio design and feel, as I think the spins were satisfying, hits felt impactful, but overall, this is a very system-driven experience. It's not an emotional one, right? This means that overall, the strengths of Slots and Daggers are that strong decision-making loop, the reasonably high build variety, and a good balance between RNG mechanics and control. There's definitely a fast-paced cycle here that could definitely be an addictive gameplay loop, which of course means the weaknesses are really there's limited spectacle, and I think that does matter. There's not really a wow moment. There's a moment of like, I've overcome an obstacle and I feel good, I've made a run with a build I like, but there's no real spectacle. The visuals are repetitive, and it can start to feel samey if you sit down and play over a long session. And I think for some players, you're going to find that this requires mental engagement. This is not really a passive game. Once you kind of know what you're doing, it feels a little passive to me, but I'm happy playing it. I don't need it to be a taxing decision-making thing, but this will require mental engagement, and you might not be interested in that. I think one other thing worth mentioning is the value for money. You're going to get a system-driven roguelite with a strong amount of replayability. And if you enjoy trying to optimize things and build crafting things, I think you'll get your money's worth. Overall, for me, I think that makes this replayability kind of high, but that's kind of the genre. It's the build diversity that gives you a reason to come back, as the core loop will support multiple runs. This means this game is really for you if you like roguelites, if you like optimizing systems, if you like decision-heavy gameplay, you're going to love this. But that means it's also not a game for you if you really prefer action over thinking. If you really are going to crave some visual variety and some kind of cinematic moments, this is not the game for you. I think Slots and Daggers is a smart game. It looks simple, but underneath that simplicity, there's a system that rewards attention, planning, and adaptation. Slots and Daggers is not flashy, it's not cinematic, it is engaging, and sometimes that's just enough. Slots and Daggers is awarded a 4 out of 5. I recommend. Hey, if you've played it, I'm curious. Did your runs feel like luck, or did you feel like your decisions mattered? Let's talk about all things Slots and Daggers in the comments.